Good morning, security gang, and welcome back to the CyberHub Podcast. It's great to be with all of y'all this morning. My name is James Azar. I'm the host of the CyberHub Podcast. I'm also a cybersecurity practitioner and a chief information security officer. Thank you all for tuning into this morning's episode. We have a packed show for all of y'all today. And it really kicks off with a third-party vendor breach that's hitting 74 U.S. banks. Canada's Freedom Mobile disclosing a customer data breach at 29.7 terabyte per second DDoS attack. That's a new record. We'll be talking about that. A Chrome patch landing and a Windows LMK exploitation quietly mitigated. So we're going to get into all the news today and why they matter for us as practitioners. And that's the difference between the CyberHub podcast and many of the others. This show, we're practitioners. We live in the cybersecurity trenches. We lead programs. We aim to protect our organizations. We want to do our best to keep our data, our customers, our employees, and our stakeholders all safe from the crazy cyber threat actors out there that are trying to get access to data they have no business getting to. So with that being said, that's why this show's a little different. So here we go. Let's get the show going. But before we do, we have a tradition on the show. Tradition I've started 800 episodes ago. We're episode 1022. And it's a shot of espresso. I love espresso. I can't drink black coffee. And so I've got my double espresso this morning. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. So good. Like an espresso early is good. Like it's a good jolt to your system. Okay. Let's move into our first breach where Marquis is now notifying the U.S. Attorney General of a data breach that impacted over 74 financial institutions. Marquis, for those who don't know, who have never been in the financial services space, are a third-party marketing and analytics provider to financial institutions. They disclosed the data theft affecting dozens of banks and credit unions, exposed data varied by institution, but commonly included names, contact details, account and relationship metadata. In some cases, partial SSN or even internal IDs were impacted by the breach. So this goes specific. The attack occurred, the ransomware attack occurred on August 14th. It's now December 4th. So it took them some time to report this, likely because they had law enforcement involved in this. So they first had to notify the Maine Attorney General office. They have the stringentest of rules of all 50 U.S. states. According to the notification filed in Maine, Iowa, and Texas, over 400,000 customers were impacted from the following 74 banks and credit unions. You see this list right here on the screen. So let's see if we find any big names together here. A lot of these are credit unions. Primarily, we're seeing kind of smaller credit unions. We're not seeing any really big banks on here. Not any of the top 10, that's for sure. These are, smaller. Pasadena Federal Credit Union, like that's just, I'm picking them out. So if you work for Pasadena, don't call me out for that one. Energy Capital Credit Union. I mean, these are predominantly all credit unions here that were all impacted. Their customers at this time, to say that there's no evidence that data has been misused or published anywhere. However, Comparatech now reporting that a deleted filing by Community First Credit Union claimed that Marquis paid a ransom, which was done to prevent the leaking and abuse of stolen data. So there's that there. Now let's talk a little bit about, if you're one of those victims, what do you need to do? You should elevate business email compromise and account recovery abuse against your customers, meaning add a process. It's uncomfortable. For how long? For however long you deem, or set a threshold, meaning customers with an account balance of this much have to go through this much. Customers with an account balance of this much have to go through these steps, and clearly communicate that to your customers through messaging. You're looking at regulatory notifications and likely regulatory questions coming your way, so just be prepared for that as well. And you're looking at contract pressure. You should treat all Marquis connected data as exposed. You should enable step-up authentication on profile changes and wire and Zelle payees. You should raise fraud velocity controls. Again, that's what I just talked about a minute ago. You should rotate any of your API keys or SFTP creds used between your financial institution and the vendor. and require event logs for the breach window. And you should also send targeted phishing advisories to affected cohorts, and enforcing your DMARC, DKIM, or SPF on customer-facing mail domains will go a very, very long way to help build some resiliency. And again, you're in the financial sector, zero room. And again, Marquis has not shared details of the attack, but the Akira gang may have been the one behind it. Again, as more information becomes available, we'll go there. Again, this is all here in this article. This is all speculation. There's no confirmation of it, so we're not going to get into it. We'll move to Freedom Mobile, which apparently is the fourth largest wireless carrier in Canada. And if you're wondering what Canada is, it's America's little baby sister north of our northern states, or as the current president called them at one point, the 51st state. The carrier reported unauthorized access that exposed customer information, including contact details, billing account metadata in scope by the customers. You could be looking at some targeted SIM swap and account recovery fraud here. That could be significant fraud. Fraudsters use carrier knowledge to bypass bank and verifier checks as well. So these types of attacks obviously go down. Freedom has 2.2 million subscribers. So, the fourth largest, Canada, all in all, I think is like 50 million people. So it's not as big of a deal as any of the top three there as well. So Freedom, this is their second data breach. They had one back in 2019. That was a third-party vendor there as well. And again, not a lot of detail on how they got in as of yet, outside of just saying that there was a data breach and that they are taking steps to mitigate and fix it. They should offer and require port-out pins and disable remote SIM swap without any high assurance of verification. They should monitor for spikes in password resets and MFA reseeds linked to Freedom numbers, and they should tune anti-SIM swap rules with their fraud teams in order to ensure that their customers and they don't become victims multiple times over. We move to France, where French home improvement DIY giant Leroy Merlin, it's an interesting name for a French. You'd think like Leroy Merlin would be something you'd find in where I live in Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi, right? Not in France. Well, Leroy Merlin's been doing a horrible job at protecting customer. I'm kidding. Okay, so their retail customer data was accessed. Contact plus purchase contacts was all taken. No evidence of payment card data stolen, but identity and order history is useful for scams and building trust within there. Leroy Merlin operates in multiple European countries as well as South Africa and Brazil. They employ 165,000 people with an annual revenue of nearly $10 billion. The incident affected only customers in France, which tells you the likely segment data by country. So that's a good thing here. Full name, phone numbers, email addresses, postal address, date of birth, and loyalty program related information were all compromised as part of this. The company clarifies that the exposed information doesn't have any financial data or account passwords. So there's that aspect there. So something that they're going to have to deal with, obviously communicate to customers, impersonations in their supplier workflow, as well as block lookalike domains, trigger 2FA prompts on risky logins, and anomaly rules for returns and redemptions. Should also be rotating vendor tokens tied to order systems in order to build a level of resiliency against any double extortion attempts in the future or the use of that data. Japan's ASCL is resuming limited ordering after a ransomware attack. The retail giant and e-commerce and office supply firm suffered a ransomware attack that disrupted ordering and fulfillment. Limited services is back while recovery continues. So again, we talked about this breach around 7 weeks ago, I think 5 or 6 weeks ago, something along those lines. I don't have that date, but it was at some point in October here. So the businesses were forced to submit orders by fax. So that was part of their business continuity. It's crazy, but it's there. So the attack on ASCL is part of a broader wave of disruptive ransomware incidents hitting major Japanese firms. Asahi, the brewer, also had a ransomware attack. We talked about that here extensively on the show. This has some significant business impact, including supply chain delays for downstream businesses, potential data exfil followed by extortion and leak pressure. Moreover, the real business impact here is that they had to get their customers out of a habit into sending faxes. And they had issues fulfilling some of those orders, meaning they obviously had a sales downstream impact. We'll get all of those details as they kind of become available, and we'll follow this along. But the business impact of this for them will be significant and will likely ripple as customers move to a different vendor. They likely will not come back in some of these cases, because once you've moved over, you typically stay. All right, we'll move to the Arizona AG suing Temu over alleged data theft and spyware behavior on Arizona consumer. The complaint alleges that the shopping app collects data well beyond legitimate use and could act as spyware on user devices. Temu disputing the characterization of the lawsuit, saying they plan to fight it out in court and show that they're not doing it. According to the lawsuit, though, Mays says that it can detect everywhere you go, to a doctor's office, public library, political event, and even to your friends' houses. So this scope of invasion of privacy is enormous, and that's why I consider it possibly the gravest violation of Arizona Consumer Fraud Act that we have ever seen in Arizona. Arizona's top prosecutor is also saying the state wants to protect businesses from being ripped off by online retailer. The attorney generals in Kentucky, Nebraska, and Arkansas have all filed similar suits in recent years against these Chinese apps. So if workforce uses personal phones for work, and you're doing a BYOD and they've got Temu on, corporate data may co-reside on a device with the app. So you have some policy and privacy risks there that you may want to revisit. Your BYOD or COPI baselines should prohibit high-risk apps on devices with corporate access. Use MDM to isolate work data and enforce device attestation altogether. So earlier this week, we talked about India's app cyber safety app mandate. Well, they backtracked from that fast. India's dropping the mandate for the Sanchar Saathi app. Authorities reversing a plan to require a government cybersecurity anti-fraud app after privacy and surveillance questions rose. So they've now backpedaled as multinationals operating in India avoid an immediate compliance clash, but the policy volatility remains at risk as it could be reinforced later or brought back in a different form or fashion with less fireworks, which is typically what government will do. So we'll see how that kind of plays out there. Microsoft silently mitigating a exploited LNK vulnerability in their environments. This is CVE 2025 94901. It's got a CVSS score of 7.0. Redmond pushing a defense in depth measure for Windows shortcut LNK exploit chain seen in the wild, a malicious.lnk to code execution link there. So this was found by Trend Micro's Zero Trust Initiative, which warned that nearly a dozen threat actors were exploiting it for years. ZDI explained the Windows failed to display critical information that could surface malicious activity when user inspected the property tabs of a shortcut LNK file. Thus, threat actors have been using specially crafted LNK files, embedding command line arguments, leading to malware execution, even if you looked at it. So user interaction was the key to exploitation. That's now been patched by Microsoft. Threat deflected. We'll continue to this largest DDoS attack here, 29.7 terabytes per second. The hyperscaler reported peaking volumetric traffic around 29.7 terabytes per second with a multi-vector reflection and even amplification, plus botnet burst, all coming together in almost like perfect sequence. The previous record of 22 terabytes per second was broken in Q3 and mitigated by Cloudflare. This one is coming from the Isiriu botnet. We talked about it here on the show several weeks ago. Cloudflare's latest DDoS threat report confirms that Isiriu drove a hypervolumetric network layer attack that peaked at that number with approximately 14.1 billion packets per second, eclipsing previous records. The attack used a UDP carpet bombing technique that hammered roughly 15,000 destination ports per second while randomizing packets attributes to slip past static filtering and even legacy scrubbing centers. Behind the record is a botnet that Cloudflare is now estimated at roughly 1 to 4 million compromised devices worldwide. The Isiriu, the dominant DDoS botnet in the current threat ecosystem, is the one behind it. And again, you kind of see these DDoS get bigger and bigger. And I'm grateful for companies like Cloudflare that are out there at the front line and doing what they got to do to make sure that these botnets don't destroy what we're trying to build in our businesses. That's extremely significant there, folks. All right, let's continue. Chrome 143 is out patching high severity vulnerabilities, including several CVEs. 2025-13630 is a V8 JavaScript and WebAssembly engine type confusion vulnerability. The remaining high severity defects includes inappropriate implementation bugs in Google Updater, that's CV 2025-13631, and DevTools 13632, and a use after free flaw in digital credentials 13633. Google said it paid $11,000 for the V8 vulnerability and $3,000 for the Google Updater bugs. So get your Google devices patched up ASAP. Anthropic's Cloud AI, now known as Cloud Skills, has been identified as a potential vector for ransomware attacks. Researchers demonstrate malicious or booby-trapped AI skills, automation, and integration could exfiltrate data or even take unintended actions when granted broad permissions. AI agents wired into email storage or even ticketing can become data exfil or even account action bots if not scoped correctly. So you want to make sure you're scoping them effectively, and what seems harmless could end up causing a ton of harm. Our final story of the day: the U.S. Attorney General and the Department of State, I believe. Is it the Department of State? Let me double check this. I think it's the Department of State. Yes, the U.S. Department of State offering a $10 million reward for Fatima Sagdahan Kashi and Mohammed Bagahar Shrinkin, who have a close working relationship coordinating cyber operations targeting elections, U.S. critical infrastructure, and businesses through the IRGC, that's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps cyber unit known as Shahid Shustari, Shahid meaning a martyr, by the way. So they oversee the group. They've been previously identified under multiple cover names, including Arya Sphere, Izandizazan, Eminent Pasagad, and look at these, nice people. Like, you'd probably see them at a beach resort somewhere and wouldn't think that they're out there causing havoc, but they are. They're now a $10 million prize for these two. So remember those faces. If you see them somewhere, they look, change maybe their hair color, maybe there's no more beards, anything like that. Just, $10 million is a good prize for their apprehension. So, it works. They're also giving you eligibility for relocation. So the Tor address is right there on the screen. It is. That's it for our show this morning, folks. We'll be back on Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern with the latest cybersecurity news. Tomorrow, Friday, we'll be dropping our weekly summary. Saturday, part 2 of our article series, how ARR became king and how it affected CISO budgets. In this portion, we dive into exactly how the subscription model and ARR pressure on cybersecurity vendors is really throwing CISOs out of whack in their budgeting, causing a whole bunch of headaches. So go check that out. That's all available at cyberhubpodcast.com. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.